Good afternoon. Before I call the first item of business, I would like to advise members that I've selected an emergency question from Neil Findlay on the IT problems at NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. This question will be taken after portfolio questions, to which we now come. Question number 1, David Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to increase the availability of educational psychologists.
Minister Alistair Allen.
Educational psychology services are provided by education authorities in Scotland as a statutory requirement under the 1980 Education Scotland Act. Educational psychologists are employed directly by authorities to fulfil those duties. We are working in partnership with the National Scottish Steering Group for Educational Psychologists to look at appropriate workforce planning at a national level.
David Stewart.
Presiding Officer, a few short weeks ago, I met a student from Elgin who just started a 2-year MSc in Educational Psychology at Strathclyde. She tells me she has to pay the full £9,265 yearly tuition fees, yet last year no fees were applicable on the course. I'll of course write to the Minister about her case. How will the introduction of tuition fees for this course widen access to higher education and tackle the shortage of educational psychologists across Scotland?
Minister. Well, of course, I'm more than happy to correspond with the member about any individual constituent. What I would say about the tuition and the costs for tuition for these courses is, of course, they have to be seen in the context of them being postgraduate courses. Were we to follow the practice elsewhere, obviously, of charging tuition fees for first degrees, then obviously things would be different, but we don't. We provide first degrees for free, and in the case of this particular postgraduate course, a loan is provided to cover the costs of tuition. I don't underestimate the task that any student faces in taking on postgraduate study, but I think it is important to say that we do have 38 students currently training, and that does meet the demands that are being set out. But as I say, I'm more than happy to correspond with the member about any individual.
Question number 2, Bill Kidd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what the educational benefits are of learning a second language.
Minister Alistair Allen.
The educational benefits of learning a second language are well documented and include personal, cognitive, economic and societal benefits. Young people develop increased confidence and better skills, including in talking and listening, and a greater understanding of how language works. The Scottish Government recognises these benefits, and that is why we have a manifesto commitment to create the conditions in which all young people can learn 2 languages in addition to their mother tongue, and that is to say the 1+2 model by the year 2020. We are taking this forward in many ways, including through additional funding and support for local authorities.
Bill Kidd.
I thank the Minister for his very full reply. Mindful of the fact that a large body of evidence has demonstrated that the benefits of a second language extend to subjects across the curriculum, can the Minister tell me further what plans the Scottish Government has to increase the provision of second language learning in our schools?
Well, the member makes a good point that, of course, the benefits of learning languages extend to other subjects, and for that reason we're working with local authorities to increase the provision of that learning so that pupils start their second language in primary 1 rather than primary 6, as generally at present, by the year 2020, and that we make steady progress towards that aim. And we also plan to introduce a third language in primary 5 in all schools by 2020. And in taking this forward, local authorities have been requested to audit their current provision in languages, and we've committed £4 million for funding in 2013 to 14 to help them start do that. But it should be said, this is not something that will appear overnight in 2020. This is going to involve a change in attitude and practice by schools across Scotland, and schools and local authorities are enthusiastic about doing that.
Mary Scanlon.
Thank you. Given the educational benefits stated by the Minister and the proposals for the future, why has foreign language assistance fallen from 284 in 2006 to only 59 in 2012? In fact, we have fewer language assistants in Scotland than Wales and Northern Ireland, despite our much bigger population.
Minister.
My understanding is that this year the number has in fact gone up from the 59 you mentioned to 74, and while obviously we'd like to see more, and that's why we work with the British Council and others and indeed provide support to the British Council and others, it is obviously open to local authorities how they wish to use the additional funding that's being provided for languages, and if they intend to use some of that for foreign language assistance, that is indeed a very cost-effective way of doing things. But I'm satisfied that we are doing a lot in that and that the numbers have been stabilised and are going up.
Question number 3, Nigel Dawn.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what it considers the benefits are of the performance of Scottish universities in recent polls for students domiciled in Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Russell.
Presiding Officer, what the rankings do is to confirm what we already know about the strengths of our world-class system of higher education. Students who study here, and let's not forget we saw a record number of Scottish students accepted into our universities this year, can be confident in the quality of what our universities offer, which is precisely why over 90% of such graduates find themselves in positive destinations 6 months after they complete their degrees.
Nigel Dawn.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. And of course, one of the consequences of the high standing of Scottish universities is that it attracts the best of foreign students. A recent report, the Richter report, commented on the number of international students who come, but the SCDI has recently warned that their biggest source of concern for the future of research in Scotland is the visa policy of the UK government. Does the Cabinet Secretary share my concerns about that?
Cabinet Secretary.
Absolutely, and there are concerns that are shared right across the higher education sector. University principals will make the point to you, and indeed in a recent event that I took part on the future of higher education in Dundee University, I think every member of the panel, including opposition parliament spokespeople in education, agreed that the policy of the UK government, successive UK governments I have to say, has been very negative in this regard. We have a detrimental impact on the international competitiveness of Scottish education as a result of it. It adds burdens to our institutions and students, and it does deter students. I have to say, and I'm sure members will not be surprised, that it is independence which is the clearest and best way of giving us the opportunity to manage immigration so that we can meet our nation's economic, social and demographic priorities.
Question 4, John Scott.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it is supporting local authorities in relation to the availability of supply teachers.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government undertakes annual teacher workforce planning discussions with local authorities, as represented by COSLA and the Association of Directors of Education, together with the professional associations, universities, the Funding Council, the General Teaching Council of Scotland and Education Scotland. This exercise includes provision for supply teachers. The Scottish Government plays an active role through the Scottish Negotiating Committee for Teachers in discussions on pay. And there is currently an SNCT pay offer on the table that will improve pay for those undertaking supply work, and I hope that the teacher unions will accept that offer. It is, of course, the responsibility of each local authority to manage its teacher workforce in such a way as to ensure they have sufficient staff to meet local needs.
Sandra White.
I thank
John Scott.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer, and he will be aware of the recent staffing difficulties at Mar College in the English department, where he himself, self-evidently, received an excellent education. Can he assure me and my constituents that the lack of appropriately qualified supply teaching staff in the English department at Mar is now resolved? And if not, what help can the Scottish Government give to South Ayrshire Council in what is and has been a very difficult situation?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm so glad that the quality of the education at Mar College shows so obviously to the member. It was indeed a high quality of education, and I should stress that the matter is one for South Ayrshire Council, and I don't want to diminish their responsibility, but as the member knows, I have inquired of South Ayrshire Council about the progress they're making and to see if assistance could be given. South Ayrshire Council are resolving the matter. They're taking steps to do it. Those steps appear to be bearing fruit. That includes appointment to new posts, and the Council is hopeful that the matter will be resolved within the next week or two, and I would encourage the member to come back to me to see if there's more help that can be given should that be required.
Sandra White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware of the recent figures which show that teacher unemployment is at its lowest for 8 years, and I'm sure, like me and others, he very much welcomes this. Can the Cabinet Secretary explain the reasons for this wonderful success?
Cabinet Secretary.
I do welcome the recent figures showing that teacher unemployment in Scotland is at its lowest in 8 years. A fall in the JSA claimant count of 29% in the last year to the lowest August figure since the current time series began in 2005 is an endorsement of the actions that we've taken. We've achieved the drop by cutting student-teacher numbers, moderating the supply side of the equation, and by securing a shared commitment with local authorities to maintain teacher numbers in line with pupil numbers to ensure a continuing demand for teachers. These figures also show a far lower level of teacher unemployment in Scotland than anywhere else in the UK. But of course, as we need to, we can adjust those figures. And I know there are subsequent questions today that I might be able to go into more detail about how we do so.
Question 5, Liz Smith.
To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with local authorities about teacher employment issues.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government discusses a wide range of issues with local authorities, including issues related to teacher employment on an individual and collective basis. In addition to ad hoc bilateral discussions with individual local authorities, we engage more formally with them about teacher employment issues in 3 ways. We have regular attendance at the Association of Directors of Education in Scotland's personnel network. Our involvement, we have a key involvement, I've said, in the Scottish Negotiating Committee for Teachers, and the representation of both COSLA and the Association of Directors of Education in Scotland with us is part of the Teacher Workforce Planning Advisory Group.
Liz Smith.
Could I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? Notwithstanding the current SNCT offer that is on the table, which is obviously designed to improve the attractiveness of supply teaching, could the Cabinet Secretary tell us what measures he believes are being put in place by the local authorities to ensure that it is these qualified supply teachers who are employed rather than other employees in local authorities who may be seen as lower cost?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, there is an obligation to provide teachers to teach in schools, and that has been an issue of some contention on other occasions. But I wouldn't expect teachers to be substituted for. What we need to do is to make sure that there's an adequate number of teachers to meet most of the anticipated circumstances. Obviously, there cannot be a system that deals with every single circumstance of every absence in every Scottish school. And there will be times where that has to be borne with. But for most of the time, there should be sufficient teachers to be able to cope in those circumstances. Now, the difficulties with teacher employment are historic. They, I think, arise from an oversupply up to 2007, which had to be adjusted, was unsustainable in the circumstances. I think we've now brought them broadly into balance, and we need to continue to keep them in balance. The teacher workforce planning exercise includes an element for supply. The new arrangements that are on the table in terms of salaries adjust the agreement we reached 2 years ago, and it was an agreement accepted by the unions and the local authorities. So it wasn't imposed, it was an accepted agreement, but it has required to be looked at again and is being looked at again. I would also say to the member that one of the surest guarantees that we can have success in this matter is to accept that keeping the essentially what we have at the moment, the ratio of teachers to pupils, is a very, very good measure to continue with. It is there, it is being used, it is part of our agreement with COSLA, and I don't think we should go into a situation where anybody questions the effectiveness of that. We should keep it in place.
Jim McAlpine.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What does the Cabinet Secretary see as the main benefits of Scotland's unique offer of a year of probation offered to all those who qualify?
Cabinet Secretary.
The year of probation is a unique offer, and it is an offer that is extremely well thought of worldwide, I have to say. Prior to the introduction of the Scotland's unique teacher induction scheme, many teachers spent their probationary period working on a piecemeal basis in a variety of schools, little or no continuity of experience or support. It was very much a sink or swim experience. Now, all new teachers who are eligible to join the scheme are offered a year-long contract with one local authority in one school. They enjoy a 4-hour weekly reduction in class contact time compared with experienced teachers, continuity in terms of the class or classes they plan for and work with, dedicated time with their mentor, and a structured programme of professional development provided by their school and local authority. This is also part of the growing and developing arrangements for teacher employment, and I spoke yesterday morning at an event organised by the teacher employment group working with the Scottish Government, in which we are looking at how teacher employment and training issues develop through probation into whole career assistance. The OECD, as long ago as in 2007, said that Scotland's approach to teacher induction was world-class. It remains world-class and will go on being world-class.
Question number 6, in the name of Helen Needy, has withdrawn. The member has provided an explanation which is satisfactory. Question number 7, Angus MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. At the risk of continuing the theme, to ask the Scottish Government what recent action it has taken to improve teacher employment.
Cabinet Secretary.
There's even more I can say, Presiding Officer, on this theme, but you don't look that enthusiastic that I do so. Post-probation employment, post-employment prospects for new teachers are better than each of the last 4 years, and I've given the figures. We did take this by taking difficult decisions to limit the supply of new teachers. We did cut student intake numbers in 2009 and cut them more severely in 2010 and then pegged them at that level in 2011. And we have also addressed the demand side. Despite the financial constraints, we've secured a shared commitment with local authorities to maintain teacher numbers in line with pupil numbers. Given the lead time, however, required to bring new teachers into the profession, we're now gradually increasing student teacher intakes again, by 300 in 2012, a further 370 in 2013, to ensure that we meet future demand without reverting to the boom and bust situation of the past. And I will be looking at the situation again later this year.
Angus MacDonald, do you want a supplementary?
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his reply and acknowledge his answers to questions number 4 and 5. I'm aware that the Scottish Negotiating Committee for Teachers has been monitoring supply issues and that the Scottish Government has been assisting with that monitoring. In light of the recent reports regarding supply teacher numbers, what steps can the Cabinet Secretary take to increase the numbers of available supply teachers in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think I should say I refer the member to the answers I gave earlier, but I would assure him we do look at it very seriously. The current SNCT pay offer, I think, will make a difference, and I would urge teachers to accept that, and that should bring some who have opted out of supply work, but the surest guarantee is maintaining the number of teachers.
Question number 8, Christina McKelvey.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to protect young people using the internet.
Minister, Eileen Campbell.
While regulation of the internet is a reserve matter, we have established a stakeholder group on child internet safety, which includes representation from a wide range of sectors. The group is a means of identifying emerging new concerns in this area and a way of highlighting and taking forward any necessary national action to address those concerns. We will continue to work within our powers with partners like Police Scotland and the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre to improve the online safety of Scotland's children, and will be announcing further steps in this area shortly.
Christina McKelvey.
Can I thank the Minister for that answer? And the Minister will be aware of the debate that I led in this chamber a few weeks ago, raising the awareness of revenge porn and its devastating impact on people affected. We now have a very frightening emerging situation of young people being groomed, threatened and bullied into performing sexual acts to very dangerous self-harming on the internet. These images and videos are then being used to blackmail young people to do more extreme acts, driving some young people to consider and even attempt suicide. Does the Minister agree that this is a very alarming situation indeed, and does she welcome the advice released this week from the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre that says, please tell someone you are not to blame?
Minister.
Absolutely, and I'm very well aware of the debate that Christina McKelvey led in the Parliament last month, and of the response that my colleague Shona Robeson gave in that debate, in which she outlined the strategies that she's taken forward about ending violence against women. Also, I would like to endorse what Christina McKelvey said about the advice from the CEOP, and also to recognise that Police Scotland has issued advice to child victims of online sexual exploitation, potential victims, parents and carers, on how to keep safe online. And absolutely, that's a message that we can't afford to not reiterate time and time again. And as I said in my original answer to Ms McKelvey, we'll be announcing more steps in this area very shortly.
Councillor Dugdale.
Thank you. Can the Minister tell me how much of her strategy is focused on peer-to-peer-led cyberbullying? Should be aware that it's a significant problem just now, and I've had a look at the Government's Behaviour in Scottish Schools report, and in the 70 pages in that document, cyberbullying is just mentioned once in one paragraph. Is she doing enough to tackle cyberbullying in schools?
Minister.
There is an online safety in Scotland is monitored by a stakeholder group on child internet safety, and cyberbullying is an area that's been looked at by this group. But, you know, as Christina McKelvey mentioned, as Kezia Dugdale, I think, is trying to bring to our attention, there is not enough that we can do on this issue. It's an area that's growing and growing, and we owe it to all children across Scotland that they should be kept free and safe from harm. So absolutely, as I said in my original answer to Christina McKelvey, we intend to announce more work on this area very shortly.
Question number 9, Jean Urquhart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when the Cabinet Secretary last met the University of Highlands and Islands Board and what issues were discussed.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, as universities are autonomous and independent bodies, board meetings are a matter for individual universities, not generally attended by Scottish ministers, nor is the board often met by ministers. Ministers, however, do meet regularly with a wide range of university chairs and principals, and I have met with the principal of UHI formally and informally in recent months, also in the absence of a chair.
Jean Urquhart.
Thank you for that reply. I wonder if on the agenda at any of these meetings, the Cabinet Secretary would agree with me that if UHI is to flourish by attracting students onto its courses, then more and appropriate residential accommodation will become a necessity in some of these partner colleges. Given the geography and structure of UHI, private development may be less attractive. Does the Cabinet Secretary accept that there may be a requirement for public funds to allow this necessary development? And is that something that he would be interested in discussing with UHI?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, UHI is a unique institution, and it consists of 13 colleges. One or two of and other bodies. One or two of those colleges have raised issues with me, particularly during my summer tour this year, about the issue of accommodation and the difficulty of attracting accommodation. And I think the member will probably be mindful of the position in Shetland when she raises this issue with me, because that was raised with me by members of the board of Shetland College, one or two of whom I did meet when I was visiting Shetland. I think the issue of how the university or how the colleges invest in that type of accommodation is an important one. I'm always happy to have those discussions. The universities very often are able to fund student accommodation through commercial arrangements, but if colleges themselves have difficulty, and if it is proved that it is needed, because the University of Highlands and Islands is also a distributed university with a distributed studentship, many of whom are online, then of course those discussions can take place, so within the context, of course, of very great pressure on public finances.
Mary Scanlon.
Thank you. Given that some of the funding for further education colleges in Highlands and Islands comes through UHI with their overhead costs of 15 million, some colleges are asking how much will be taken out of the funding for colleges as it is filtered through and down through UHI.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, that has been a long-term issue, and as the member will know, because she participated in the discussions on the post-16 bill and indeed had a meeting with other MSPs and myself about this specific issue, there is in the post-16 bill legislation that should ensure that there is an agreed amount of money that is taken, and there is a role for the Scottish Funding Council. The real solution to this problem, which has been, of course, a matter of grievance, as a member knows in the past, is to ensure that the positioning of the Further Education Board within the University of the Highlands Islands is strong, and that there is a mutual respect between that board and its component parts and the university as a whole. I do believe that the recent change to the university's Articles of Association will help to achieve that. The legislation sort of guarantees that and builds that in, and of course, were there to be any question that that would not be the case, then the Scottish Funding Council are all. So I think there's a triple lock on that, and I think this Chamber and Highlands members particularly, and I pay tribute to all the Highland members who were involved in that, Highland members have helped to secure that, plus the representations from a range of colleges.
Question number 10, Kezia Dugdale.
To ask the Scottish Government whether the replacement for the GLOW network will be operational by December 2013.
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I give the member a positive no? Because we're not waiting until December. New GLOW services are being rolled out now and will continue to be introduced and come on stream in the coming months, including services to support the migration of information into Office 365, as well as the introduction of agile, open, best-of-breed systems that will enhance learning for the children, young people and practitioners in Scotland. I can, Presiding Officer, announce today that Bill Maxwell, Chief Executive of Education Scotland, will be writing to all Directors of Education later this week about the next level of support we will be giving to local authorities to help them manage the change as they move from a decade-old SharePoint 2003 portal into a 2013 SharePoint environment. Migration has, of course, proved technically challenging, as I know from my conversation at the Scottish Learning Festival with RM, the contractor, last week, but they and I are confident it will be successfully completed.
Kezia Dugdale.
I find that answer very surprising, Presiding Officer, because the ICT group he mentions have described the project as in chaos, and Education Scotland told Dumfries and Galloway Council that it wouldn't be ready until October 2014. He spent £5.5 million extending the contract and has spent £80 million already on the GLOW network, which isn't working. Thousands of hours of teachers' work has been lost and thousands more are required to rebuild it. Can the Cabinet Secretary tell teachers and pupils what they've got for the £80 million he spent on GLOW?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I would advise the member to just be careful about some of the rhetoric that's surrounding this from one or two individuals. It is not borne out, for example, by the teacher member of some of the significant groups. It is not borne out by a number of people at the Learning Festival to whom I spoke, and indeed some of the traffic at the Learning Festival on this. But let me be very clear, Presiding Officer, what is happening. The move from current GLOW to GLOW in Office 365 started in April 2013 with the migration of the email system. That's now complete. There were significant technical issues associated with the migration of the data from the current GLOW portal to the new SharePoint 2013 environment, which we have worked with partner organisations, RM and Microsoft, to overcome. The migration of this content is now well underway. Around 2/3 of the content has been migrated to date, and 20 local authorities now have access to all the new services in Office 365. The remaining 12 local authorities will have their portal content migrated by December 2013, which will include access to the Office 365 environment. The data is being transferred across from the SharePoint 2003 to SharePoint 2013, but the unpacking of the data into the new SharePoint 2013 environment is proving difficult for some local authorities to manage. Ongoing work with key GLOW contacts in local authorities continues to support them during this period of change, including an adoption support site available in Office 365 with some bespoke materials. I'm glad that Jackie Bailey enjoys this because she will technically be entirely familiar with what I'm talking about, she being very switched on. And these materials are being developed by Teachers for Teachers. The Office 365 support materials have been made available. By dual running of current GLOW and Office 365 for a period of 6 months, it will give local authorities more time to carefully consider and consult on what content they really want and need to populate their new environment, creating the best possible experiences for children, young people and users of their own GLOW service. So I think, well, I'm glad that members enjoyed. I have a great deal more of this if members would wish it, because I think I heard a no there from some members, so clearly they are fully satisfied with what is taking place. GLOW has been a remarkable success. It continues to be, but of course it will change. It is an average of 55,000 weekly users. It had 1.3 million GLOW logons in May and June this year. It is a success. Well, I am very happy if the member wishes to have access to GLOW by means of her own password. I am willing to arrange that. Then she will see how GLOW operates, and that will give her huge confidence in what is taking place and the work of so many people to make it work.
Question number 11, Mary Fee.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it will take to ensure that looked after children who have been in multiple placements have access to a stable education.
Minister Eileen Campbell.
The Scottish Government will continue to make sure the needs of looked after children, young people and care leavers who have experienced multiple placements are embedded in its wider work to improve outcomes such as getting it right for every child, curriculum for excellence, additional support for learning and more choices, more chances. The Children and Young People Bill will improve the way services work to support children, young people and families by ensuring there is a single planning approach for children who need additional support from services, creating a single point of contact around every child or young person, ensuring coordinated planning and delivery of services with a focus on outcomes, and providing a holistic and shared understanding of a child or young person's well-being. The bill also places a duty on corporate parents to collaborate with each other when exercising their duties in relation to looked after children, young people and care leavers.
Mary Fee.
I thank the Minister for that answer. GIRFEC and a stable home life are indeed important factors in stability for looked after children. However, we know that looked after children are significantly more likely to use our colleges than our universities. And does the Minister agree with me that with college budgets being cut, we must do more to support looked after young people with their second chance education?
Minister.
We are doing an enormous amount of work to support children who are looked after, and I could go on to list a number of the things in which we're doing that. We've created CELSIS, we've strengthened additional support for learning legislation, We are doing much to ensure that practitioners are empowered and given the appropriate training materials. But yes, still persistently, there is the attainment of looked after children needs to be supported more fully, and to give them the opportunities that every other children and every other child across the country has. So absolutely we'll ensure that the Children and Young People Bill helps us to move that agenda forward. And I know that it's something that not just me and my portfolio, but across the whole education brief and across the government, that we're intending to make sure that we take our corporate parenting responsibilities very seriously to ensure that these children go on to succeed.
Question number 12, Malcolm Chisholm.
To ask the Scottish Government how many female students were enrolled in colleges in 2007 and 2012.
Cabinet Secretary.
Planning Office of Scottish Funding Council figures show the majority of college learners are female. According to the SFC, the figure for female FTE students was 68,724 in academic year 2006-07 and 68,642 in 2011-12, a change of 0.1%. I'm pleased to say this means that overall learning activity for female learners has been broadly maintained.
Malcolm Chisholm.
The Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I noticed he gave the answer very quickly, so it was quite difficult to catch the detail. But is it not the case that there has been a sharp decline in the number of part-time students in FE colleges, and that the majority of those students are women? So can I ask him what gender impact assessment he applied before changing college policy and reducing the part-time places that are available?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think we've been very clear all along that it is and was very important at a time of very considerable pressure on youth unemployment, for example, that we moved as quickly and as radically as we could to ensuring that there was longer learning opportunity, more focused learning opportunity for those and to take account of employment needs. Now, that has been challenging, but has been successful. And I would point out to Malcolm Chisholm that we have actually met our targets, more than met our targets in terms of full-time equivalent student numbers. They're virtually unchanged since 2006-07. And it's been that focus on full-time equivalent numbers that's been important. But, and I do accept the point, that it is very important to continue to focus on women learners and particularly disadvantaged women learners. For example, we have asked colleges to deliver more for women. We've invested an extra £10 million in the academic year 13-14 to help target additional places for women returning to education. And those learners will be supported with record levels of student support, £97 million, including an additional £1.9 million this year for childcare and improved bursaries. So there are actions being taken, and I think those actions will help in terms of employment, and they will also help in terms of access.
Question 13, Neil Findlay.
To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to improve the quality of careers guidance provision in schools.
Minister Angela Constance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Career Information Advice and Guidance Strategy was published in March 2011. It sets the framework for the redesign and improvement of career guidance for all, and Skills Development Scotland have been modernising their offer to schools and carrying out a series of reviews to ensure that this is meeting the needs of today's young people. The focus of which is very much on developing the career management skills of individuals in order to equip them to seek and grasp career opportunities and to have the agility to cope when their circumstances change throughout their working lives.
Neil Findlay.
In a recent study of the My World of Work website, Edinburgh University academics Cathy Howson and Sheila Semple confirmed that web-based services should never replace face-to-face contact because face-to-face contact is most valued by the majority of young people. Given the recent Skills Development Scotland research, only 859 pupils out of 200,000 who are registered responded to the survey. Does the Minister accept that drawn conclusions about the value of My World of Work from such a small survey should be treated with extreme caution?
Minister.
Well, my understanding of the Skills Development Scotland Customer Satisfaction Survey is that they had between 800 and 900 people reply to that survey, and that the research that Mr Finlay mentions, they interviewed about 1,000 young people. So I'll actually take the evidence in the round, because the evidence in the round from this research and previous research demonstrates what we've always said as a government, that we have not and will not replace web-based services with frontline careers advisors. So the modernisation process is about having various channels of delivery. Yes, this is the modern world. We want to be using web-based facilities, but we also want to retain face-to-face contact. And in Scotland, Skills Development Scotland last year delivered to all S4, 5 and 6 group sessions face-to-face contact in relation to My World of Work and the vitally important career management skills. So we're delivering our careers information, advice and guidance strategy through a variety of methods, and we will continue to do so.
Question 14, Rhoda Grant.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it has taken to ensure that all schools have adequate internet connections. Minister
Alistair Allen.
At a cost of £2.1 million in 2013-14, the Scottish Government funds Interconnect 2, a high-speed broadband network which provides an internet connection to all 32 Scottish local authorities intended for use by education establishments. Whilst Interconnect delivers broadband to the local authority connectivity to individual education establishments, I'll say that again. Whilst Interconnect delivers broadband to the local authority, the importance of commas, connectivity to the individual education establishments remains the responsibility of the authority. Over £410 million of public and private sector funding is being invested in two of the largest and most complex next-generation broadband infrastructure projects anywhere in Europe. And within this, investment in the Highlands and Islands amounts to some £146 million, with £264 million invested in the rest of Scotland.
Rhoda Grant.
I thank the Minister for that response. He'll be aware that connectivity in remote and rural areas provides schools with the ability to offer a wider curriculum. Given that the Scottish Government is delivering Interconnect to 32 local authorities, he'll be very well aware that in the Highlands and Islands that proves to a challenge to those authorities that have the biggest geographical spread, more schools and distances to travel, the challenge to them to deliver that to school. What action and indeed support is he giving to them to ensure that we have a level playing field and children in Barra gain from this service as well as children in Baillieston?
Minister.
Well, as the member alludes to, as an island member, I have an interest in this as well, and I am never done being in touch with HIE and other agencies about some of the issues around rural broadband in the Highlands and Islands. It should be said that from a national point of view, after this year, SWAN, the Scotland-wide area network for schools, will replace much of what is currently in place through Interconnect. But it is also worth stressing, as I mentioned, that a truly enormous sum of public money is going into broadband in the Highlands and Islands. As I say, £146 million is going to be invested to bring fibre cable to many parts of Scotland which don't have it. And I entirely agree with the sentiment that everywhere in Scotland, every school in Scotland deserves that right to connectivity.
Question 15, Annabel Ewing.
To ask the Scottish Government what procedure local authorities should follow when taking decisions to close schools.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it's important that local authorities are open and transparent in their consultation with parents, children and communities on school closure proposals. The Schools Consultation Scotland Act 2010 sets out a clear process for statutory consultation and proposed changes to the school estate, and ministers expect councils to comply fully with these statutory duties.
Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware of Labour-led Fife Council's plans to close a number of primary schools, notwithstanding that parents' views have not been taken into account and the proposals do not make financial sense. Is there anything that the parents of, for example, Crombie, Wellwood and Pitcorthy primary schools can do to ensure that their voice is heard?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I am aware that on the 16th of September, Fife Council commenced a phased consultation under the Schools Consultation Scotland Act 2010 on a series of school closure proposals. These consultations will run over the next 2 weeks. Full details can be found on Fife Council's website. However, the Act requires the Council to inform relevant consultees, which includes parents of any pupils at any affected school, of the proposals and how they may respond to the consultation. This includes attending a public meeting or responding in writing to the consultation. I would strongly encourage all parents and any other interested parties to take these opportunities to ensure their voices are heard. The Scottish ministers may, under the terms of the 2010 Act, call in and subsequently determine a closure decision. It's inappropriate to comment further at this stage on Fife's plans, in case that is seen to prejudice any decisions that have to be taken. However, as clearly required by the 2010 Act, I expect educational benefit for the affected children to be central to all school closure proposals that any council brings forward.
Question 16, Sandra White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it considers the impact is of UK student visas rules on Scotland's universities and colleges.
Cabinet Secretary.
As I indicated earlier, Presiding Officer, we welcome talented people to live, learn, work and remain in Scotland. However, the negative message sent to prospective students by UK Government student visa policies is a significant concern. These policies threaten a detrimental impact on the international competitiveness of Scottish education, create additional burdens on institutions and students, and could well deter prospective students from applying to study in the UK. The Government has made clear our concerns to successive UK ministers of various hues on several occasions. An independent Scotland would manage immigration in a way that effectively meets our nation's economic, social and demographic priorities for a sector that is one of the largest in our economy.
Sandra White.
I thank the Minister for that reply and his earlier reply also. Can I ask if he's also aware of the problems facing many students from so-called blacklisted countries in opening bank accounts here in Scotland, forcing many to be unable to continue studying and ultimately having to return home?
Secretary.
I understand, Presiding Officer, that the UK Immigration Bill is expected to be introduced during the second week in October. The bill will propose banks should no longer be permitted to operate bank accounts for certain migrants. I also understand that the Home Office also intends to consult on additional powers to compel banks to close bank accounts for certain illegal migrants. My understanding is this should not affect the bank accounts of those studying legitimately in Scotland, but I would stress the Scottish Government hasn't seen this piece of draft legislation. We'll be monitoring it closely, and I cannot imagine any legislation of this nature will actually draw people to study in Scotland, and that is the issue. If these actions are deterring people from studying in Scotland, they are deeply undesirable. The Scottish Government should have a responsibility here, and I don't think any Scottish Government, any hue, would act in this way.
The next item of business is an emergency question from Neil Findlay on the IT problems at NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. Mr Findlay.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the IT problem at NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde.
Cabinet Secretary Alec Neil.
Officer, NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde have informed us that as a result of a failure in their IT infrastructure yesterday morning, a number of outpatient appointments, inpatient procedures, day surgery cases and chemotherapy appointments have had to be postponed. Despite NHS staff working overnight to resolve this issue, it has continued into today. Let me stress right away, Presiding Officer, that maternity and emergency services have been maintained throughout. I understand that the failure is related to network servers that serve a number of the board's systems and sites. This meant that clinicians were unable to access some services, including some patient records and imaging. In addition, the recognised standby process did not kick in. There has been minimal